and showcases the different practices that they've undertaken to safeguard their surrounding ocean. BUEI appreciates the generous sponsorship of Chubb Bermuda, the exclusive sponsor of this series. Island SOS aligns with Chubb's mission to promote a healthy and sustainable planet, strengthen the resilience of communities, and to protect biodiversity against the effects of climate change. Today's presentation is the fifth in our series this year, and it focuses on the sustainable ocean strategy undertaken by a family that is responsible for the Noises, a chain of islands and rock stacks located off the coast of the North Island of New Zealand. The Noises are home to an incredible range of seabirds, invertebrates, reptiles, and indigenous vegetation too. Celebrated for their outstanding beauty and biodiversity, the Noises have fallen victim to careless visitors and overfishing over the years, and have decimated their environmental ecosystem surrounding the islands over time. Our presenter today, Sue Neureuter, is one of 3 custodians of the Noises, and I'd like your hand in welcoming Sue to the presentation today. Welcome, Sue, and I'll turn over the mic to you for your presentation today, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, William. Tēnā koutou katoa. Hello, everyone. Thanks to BUEI for inviting me to share our Noises story with you today. Our family, as William has said, our family have been the custodians of the Noises group of islands for the past 90 years. And today I'd like to provide you with an overview of what we've been doing around the islands. Next slide, please. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Fantastic, thanks. The Noises are located in the northern part of the North Island of New Zealand, in the centre of what was once considered to be a really rich and biodiverse area known as the Hauraki Gulf, Te Kapamoana Te Moana Nui Atoi. The group of islands they're about 24 kilometres from our biggest city, Auckland, and it's home to nearly 2 million people and subject to all the pressures associated with a large city. The Gulf itself covers around 4,000 square kilometres, and despite the many islands located in the Gulf, the landmass makes up a very small percentage of the total area. Next slide. Next slide, please. The largest 3 islands in the group are Motuhorupapa at about 10 hectares, Otata's 20 hectares, and Maria Islands about 2.5 hectares. There are other smaller islands, and they're surrounded by rock stacks and an extensive network of interconnecting reefs, most of which you can't see, they're underwater. What you can see is the areas dominated by the marine environment, and what we do know is the health of the islands themselves is directly related to the health of the marine environment that surrounds them. Next slide. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to elaborate on each of these points, but in my lifetime, I've got memories of change spanning over 50 years. And when you love something, it's easy to pay attention and notice environmental change. And with some notable exceptions, it's mostly been positive on land. But the same can't be said for the marine environment. And over the past 10 years, we've been learning it's much harder to do something about that. Next slide. So I'll start with the positives anyway. Next slide. Most people don't know what predator-free looks like, and we don't have natural mammalian predators in New Zealand. So entire populations of native animal and plant species are being decimated. And our species don't have any natural defence against rats, stoats, cats, and possums. The islands are all predator-free, and you might wonder why I'm talking about that, but it's part of the whole picture in explaining the importance of those land-sea connections. Back in 1962, Little Maria Island was the first island in New Zealand and quite possibly globally to have rats successfully eradicated off it. They'd been accidentally introduced to the island and had all but decimated the large colony of white-faced storm petrels. It's a tiny, beautiful endemic seabird species that breed there. Next slide, please. So I'm going to play some song from the biggest island, Otata, as it was on the island 2 weeks ago. So if we could play that audio, please. Being rat-free makes a huge difference to breeding success of endemic land and seabirds, reptiles, and insects. Next slide. So my hand is in the middle of this picture. It helps illustrate the size of the wetapunga. It's the largest cricket in the world and one of the heaviest insects. And some of New Zealand's insects have evolved to huge sizes to fill the niche that would have once been occupied by small mammals. No rats mean that islands can offer a safe haven for reintroducing endangered insects and reptiles that no longer exist on the mainland. Next slide, please. And then the following one. Being predator-free and having multiple breeding seabird species is one of the reasons that islands have been used for study by so many over such a long period of time. Following the eradication on Maria Island and using knowledge gained over the next 40 years, all of the islands have been predator-free since 2002, as are many other islands in the Hauraki Gulf. Next. 2 years ago, the museum started gathering terrestrial baseline data to document long-term environmental change. We anticipate this research undertaken collectively with the University of Auckland marine sciences and our family will show how marine protection regenerates not only the marine environment, but how it has a positive effect on the species in the terrestrial environment, highlighting the importance of true ecosystem protection and how everything's connected. We can't continue to keep protecting one without the other. Next. So New Zealand is the global capital for seabirds. We have more threatened seabirds than anywhere else in the world, and by far the highest number of breeding seabird endemics in the world. The Hauraki Gulf is a major hotspot with 27 species breeding in the wider area. Next, please. The noises have the greatest concentration of seabird species in the Hauraki Gulf. And at this time of the year, these petrels return to breed on the islands. It's a really unforgettable experience to be there, to hear this sound at night. If we could play the audio, that'd be cool. Seabirds are a major link between the land and the sea. They transport those marine nutrients to the land when they come ashore to breed. And their guano, food, broken eggs, and dead chicks all contribute to fertilizing the land, and that fires up the terrestrial ecosystem. So that rich fertilizer gets dug into the earth, and as the birds burrow, it's like a free composting system, and it means the plants and the trees thrive. So the insects, reptiles, and land birds thrive as well. Next slide. When it rains, those rich marine nutrients brought to land by the birds are washed down to enrich the nearshore marine environment. Marine biodiversity used to be rich around all the islands, but that life's gradually been ebbing away. There are multiple reasons for this, and amongst them, the huge flocks of thousands of mixed seabirds we once see regularly feeding in the waters around the noises have all but gone. So have the forage fish they feed on, scooped up in commercial nets to feed a low-value fishery. The waters are impacted by sedimentation containing pollutants from intensive urbanization, farming and forestry practices, and we don't yet fully understand how climate change is contributing to these losses. But the disappearance of that abundant bird life means the ecosystem services that they once provided have also gone. So the sea is no longer loaded with their nutrient-rich guano, so it can no longer support the biodiversity that it once did. We can protect our islands from predators and think we've done the job, but we must also consider what's going on under the water. If we haven't ensured the seabirds' food supply, they can't breed successfully. And that means the islands themselves won't reach their capacity to flourish. We're seeing the loss of multiple seabird species, blue penguins, white-fronted terns, and shags, all of which need to feed locally when they're breeding. Therefore, seabirds, or the lack of them, are an important indicator of the health of our marine ecosystem. Next slide. And the following one. This slide shows layers of occupation dating back 700 years. The islands were used by Mauri, the indigenous people of New Zealand, as a seasonal place for harvesting kai, or food, from both land and sea. The midden, or ancient rubbish dump, in this slide's being is a valuable reference library that tells us stories of the people that came before us and how they lived, where they travelled and how they traded. It's provided rich information about the natural environment, the species of fish and shellfish that lived in the surrounding waters. And it tells us about changes in biodiversity to both land and sea, giving us a valuable comparison to what we see today. It confirms what we've lost, and it provides us with aspirations for restoration. By international comparison, human settlement's relatively recent in New Zealand, so it's less than 1,000 years. And the midden also tells us what the land and sea was like at that very first point of human contact, and that's a rare opportunity globally. But most valuable, it provides the opportunity for us to connect and develop strong relationships with mana whenua. So that's a term for Maori whose ancestry or whakapapa connects them to an area, in this case, this area. Their long-term connection to the islands and marine environments just so evident through the middens, and their worldview acknowledges that everything's connected, that what we do on the land has an impact on our marine environment, and that's a view our families always understood. Next slide. Information from the middens and extensive scientific marine surveys conducted in 2017 and 21, as well as other ongoing research, shows us the Noises has always been a biodiversity hotspot. We're fortunate the islands and reef systems are located at a meeting point of the clear outer Gulf waters and the more turbid inner Gulf waters. And it means that despite all the abuse they've had, they're still relatively rich in marine nutrients, and more biodiversity flourishes there than in many other places. We'll just click on the next two slides slowly. There's just an example of some of the biodiversity. Yeah, and the following slide. So then now there are so many opportunities for research. And 2 years ago, a team from the University of Auckland's Institute of Marine Science trialled research to better understand the relationship between sea urchins and kelp forests and how removing plague numbers of urchins may help to restore ecosystem balance. It's been a spectacular success in the intertidal zone. Once again, a gorgeous garden of mixed algae. It hasn't looked like this in probably 40 years. And the deeper urchin barrens are now mostly again recovered in kelp forest. So that trial has provided a greater understanding of how best to restore kelp. And it's wonderful to have a positive story. The barrens are widespread concern in New Zealand and occur globally in some temperate zones. So, however, without protection, we can't address the reason this widespread imbalance is occurring. And that is, we've harvested the spiny lobster to functional extinction, and we've fished out most of the large snapper. And as these are the two species that eat the urchins, there's nothing to keep the area from returning to an urchin barren over time. Next slide, please. And then going on again. In late 2019, our family partnered with Auckland Museum and the University of Auckland. We've previously worked with both of them, and we all hoped this partnership would amplify our efforts for the Noises to be included in a suite of anticipated new protection measures for the Hauraki Gulf. This would be the culmination of 10 years of effort by many who recognise the Hauraki Gulf, or the waters of the Hauraki Gulf, are in trouble and urgent change is needed. At present, a pathetic 0.3% of the Gulf's protected, so it's no wonder it's in trouble. And in September 2021, we submitted our Noises regeneration proposal to the government. So our proposal was a bold plan that offered a practical and modern alternative to the current Marine Reserves Act, which was established 50 years ago and is no longer fit for purpose. It proposes protecting an area of high marine biodiversity covering about 60 square kilometres. So that's 8 to 10 times larger than any of our existing marine protected areas. And it encompasses a wide range of marine habitats. And I don't think we've got any idea how amazing it could be or what we'd see if we actually protected an area of this size. and especially if it's part of a whole network of marine protected areas. So a year after we submitted our regeneration proposal, the Department of Conservation released their plan to revitalise the Gulf. It included our proposed noises marine protection as one of 12 new proposed high protection areas, but fell short of including all of our guiding principles. Next slide, please. This is just a quick summary of our guiding principles for the noises regeneration, and I'll give you a moment just to look through them before I continue. So in October 2022, these new DOC proposals were then open to public submission, and over 11,000 people submitted. I think the high level of interest in the Gulf is driven by one of two things, either by those recognising the Gulf is in trouble and wanting to support mechanisms for change, or by those wanting to maintain the status quo and protect perceived rights to extract. However, despite the repeated efforts of many to push for the release of draft legislation we've been told has been written, we've only had assurances since last December that an announcement's imminent. We have general elections this coming October, so time's running out, and even if there is an announcement now, we suspect it'll fall far short of what's needed to turn the tide on the health of the Hauraki Gulf. You know, as we continue to learn, it almost feels as if we've now grown past our submission. I think we have to keep evolving our ideas, in part because the marine ecosystem's changing so fast, but also to ensure we can develop practical solutions that will receive the most support. Next slide. So as you can see from this slide, the noises is a real fishing mecca. The amount of fish being extracted from around the islands, both recreationally and commercially, has always been intense and is increasing, and it's certainly been the major contributing factor to the declines in biodiversity and abundance that we've seen and that we continue to see. Next slide, please. So I put this slide in because the next three slides, so they reinforce our need for urgent action and the need to be adaptable. This slide still shows a relatively healthy mussel reef. It's an intertidal reef, and that was only 2020. And if we carry on with the next two slides, please, and the following one. And this is what that same reef looks like today. We could never have anticipated this loss 10 years ago, yet still it's not enough to make change. In New Zealand, it seems that we have to lose a species before action's taken. It's like a repetitive case of closing the door after the horse is bolted. Next slide. But moving on, I'd now like to talk a bit about the path we've chosen and what we've learned over the past few years. The importance of building solid relationships from the beginning just can't be overstated. It includes being able to communicate with those who may not share our views, and we've seen it's possible to bring people with us, but it's not done by standing back and throwing rocks at one another, but by listening to the concerns of others and acknowledging what's important to them and finding common ground and respect. Then we can go on to tackle the more controversial subjects. What matters now isn't who caused the declines, but what we collectively do next. And without building those relationships of trust and respect, we won't be able to communicate the urgency around the need for regeneration or stress the importance of restoration and how everyone can benefit. And on that note, we've found there's no substitute for bringing people to join us on the noises. You know, visits provide a first-hand experience to understand the problems. And over the years, we've had Maori leaders, mana whenua, and a wide range of stakeholders joining us. So a day on the water, snorkeling and walking on Otata really helps clarify the issues and brings that first-hand knowledge and understanding of their importance and relevance. It provides opportunities for discussions that in a normal work environment, there wouldn't be time for. They just wouldn't happen. So without exception, we've seen these trips to the islands do change perceptions and they do alter previously held views. And the trips are especially important for many of our bureaucrats and politicians because they may never have been in Hauraki Gulf before, but they're the ones making the decisions about its future. You have to know a place to love it and care for it. And it's really important to be able to bridge that disconnect between urban dwellers and their understanding of the marine world. So it's for this reason we proposed a local advisory group to be made up of people who do have intimate knowledge of the noises and a long-held connection to place. We envisage this will bring a small but diverse group that together, and they'll be able to share their knowledge and work well together for a common goal to ensure that the decisions that are made today aren't short-term fixes or box-ticking exercises, but will provide long-term solutions where we'll continue to see the benefits far into the future. Mana whenua and our family are going to be here for the long haul. So, it's in all of our best interests to ensure that these are robust decisions for our future. The group would ideally work alongside our Department of Conservation and Fisheries, New Zealand, to provide them with the best advice to ensure the best outcomes. It makes sense to us to trial this concept of an advisory body at the noises and show how it can work, so then other areas might adapt their own models specific to place. We've also found working alongside Maori as the opportunity to learn from their knowledge gained over generations of interspecies relationships and whole system thinking. Placing that knowledge alongside Western science and then further incorporating our own observations of massive change over the past 50 years, it may enable us to collectively come up with the most adaptive, effective, and robust ways to regenerate our marine environment. For some years, we've been establishing relationships with mana whenua to better understand their view of what's needed in this space. Interestingly, the advances in marine protection in New Zealand today are being achieved by Maori, mainly through the indigenous practice of rahui, or temporary closure, to revitalise specific places and species, and we're really supportive of these processes. There are definitely challenges to achieving all of this. One obstacle to success is institutional aversion to perceived risk, especially around trying something new. So in my opinion, it's a major contributing factor to our current environmental loss, because we can't expect to continue to remain comfortably what we're doing and achieve change. It is time to take risk, and it's never been more important to have legislation that can adapt to the changes coming from global warming and biodiversity loss. And in the past 10 years, we've seen change we couldn't have anticipated 10 years ago. I think it's a bit of a case of learning to fly the plane while we're still building it. Next slide, please. So, scallops, abalone, and important endemic green shell mussel beds have always been present around the Noises. All three of them are now threatened by continued harvest pressure and likely impacted by sedimentation. So it's critical we don't lose them, or we lose the chance to understand how we can use them to kickstart regeneration elsewhere. When protective measures are established for the Noises, we can trial those regeneration ideas without fear of that trial being harvested or eaten. It might be as simple as studying what requirements certain species need to regenerate on their own, or it could be trialing more active research and translocation ideas to kickstart recovery in more suitable places. Our goal is to use the Noises to develop understanding of how this can be successfully achieved, and then share this knowledge with others, especially decision makers, to provide them with the support they need to confidently make good decisions. So nowadays, protection of anything, and especially protection around the Noises, it needs to count for more than just the immediate benefit to the immediate protected marine environment. I'm happy to share more of those challenges and support we've had and what we've been learning during our Q&A. But to finish off, although we wish to continue to use the Noises for research and education, Without some clear commitment to regeneration or some form of protection, it's difficult to see the benefits in continuing to bring people to a place that's not easily accessible to look at depletion and loss. We can do that just about anywhere around our coast, and it's soul-destroying to be constantly talking about loss. Given the islands themselves are already protected, this is the opportunity for whole ecosystem restoration, and future legislation must recognise land-sea connections, and to move away from protecting those pockets in isolation. So when we protect an area, we need to consider the benefits that that protection will provide to outside the area, whether it's the spillover effect, but also how we manage the surrounding non-protected marine environment. So for example, if the noises are protected, but it just continues to be a magnet for even more fishing pressure to amass on the boundaries, and we don't adjust our present harvesting methods or the catch limits that we have, then the benefits of that protection will be compromised. So it's about managing entire ecosystems than just looking at single species management, which is what we presently do. Next slide, please. There are so many people that we do need to thank for their support in getting us. Just carry on. There are so many people today that we need to thank for their support in getting us where we are. They've each brought their own particular area of expertise to enrich and further the noises work. These relationships, it's these relationships that help us to be in the position that we are. And the support we've had from NGOs like Foundation North, Pew, and the C&L Gregory Trust has provided us with opportunities to get people to the islands and to develop our ideas. It's been no small undertaking, but while we've yet to see positive change in the marine environment, we are changing the way people think. And never more than now have we needed places to study regeneration and to experience positive gains. And special places, that make our hearts sing, and above all, that offer that much needed hope for the future and for the next generations. If we can show it's possible to make positive change, we may inspire others to try. And personally, I want to again experience those feelings of joy that come from seeing a place that I really love thrive again. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Sue. I'm not sure if you're able to hear, but we've got a resounding round of applause going on for you. I just wanted to bridge on just before question and answer, and just before I ask the audience if they have any questions they'd like to ask. If, as you highlighted, if you could just share a little bit more about the challenges that you currently face to protection of the noises, and what solutions you would propose to overcome them.
Yeah, I think a couple of the challenges are we don't seem to have a clear directive for surveillance or enforcement of the. We don't have a clear directive for surveillance or enforcement even of the protected areas that we have today. And so I believe it's a real blocker to advancing marine protection. So if there's not the will or the funding to find creative solutions to this, then I don't know how we're going to enforce the new marine protected areas, because it's a really quite a large area. There's quite a large area of them. Because it creates an expectation that if you've got marine protection, it can't just be lines on a map. It needs to be robust. It needs to be enforceable for it to actually work. So there are so many solutions that are available to us now. There's modern technology that we have that we didn't have years ago. It doesn't require people on the water constantly randomly trawling around the place to do this. So, I think it's working with technology. Some of that technology we're already using around the noises today for monitoring. It requires imagination and creative solutions. Likewise, with we need robust monitoring programs. If we have these high protection areas in place, There's no point in putting them there if we don't know whether they're working or not. So you need a regular monitoring program, because if it's not working, then you need to tweak it or change it. And if it is working, then use that knowledge for how we manage your other areas. I think another challenge we have is that in New Zealand, we quite rightly ask for Maori representation with decision making and on tables. But in the processes that I've been involved in the past, with fisheries and so on, you get all the usual suspects like the fisheries representatives, whether they're commercial or recreational, NGOs, government departments, etc., etc. They're all fully funded, and their focus is entirely on this one thing. So they're there to present their views on the marine environment that they know very well. But we ask Maori to be at the table, and we don't provide that same level of support to them to be there. And there's an awful lot of conflicting interests out there. So, I think what we need to do in the future is provide proper employment opportunities so that we all have the same opportunity to sit at the table, same opportunity to present our views, and the same opportunity to know exactly what is going on in the Hauraki Gulf today. And I think we used to lead the world with marine protection and also with our quota management system, and we've just fallen so far behind. But I think what we also have an opportunity with now, especially around the noises, is that we've got these amazing species like the green shell mussels, the scallops, and also paua or abalone. And they're all really commercially important species. So what we need to do now is do trials on these things when they're protected, so that we can use them for not only restoration, but they might also be a really useful link for our aquaculture industry. So you have your economic gains as well as your environmental ones. And given that the economy always seems to trump the natural world or restoration or anything like that, it's a case of marrying the two together so that we get both. And then I think we'll get a lot more support for that. I think that's probably a few of those things that we see as challenges, but possible solutions.
Yes. Are there any specific positions you would propose establishing, particularly for employment of Maori communities as well, and engagement with the protection of the noises?
I think that would be over to Maori for their leadership. It's about how we support them and finding out what it is that they need for that support to be able to fully engage and be able to make this a full job for them. We all stand to gain. The environment stands to gain by having everyone at the table with the same knowledge. Also, to be able to share our own particular knowledge.
Absolutely. And just if I may, Sue, I'm also going to pass over to the audience too for questions. So if anyone does have any questions they'd like to ask our host, please do raise your hand and I'll come around. And just a reminder, please do speak directly into the microphone, just so we can ensure that that it is picked up for our audience watching around the world. And for Sue too. Would anyone like to ask our presenter anything this morning?
Hi, thank you for your talk. And I was just wondering, what is the status of the islands? Are they private property? Can anyone just show up and walk on them, or fish off them? I was just curious about that.
So they are private property. Anyone can come ashore. We try to discourage that because they're pest free and they're also pretty much weed free. So there's that biosecurity risk when people do come ashore and walk around. But that said, if people are interested enough to actually come out there and see them, then we don't want to say no, because that's how you learn, is by getting people involved. But as far as the waters around the islands are concerned, I'm afraid it's still pretty much a free-for-all. And that's the bit that we're trying to change. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you for the tour, for the information. Very interesting. How does one actually organize to get on a tour then to get out and see the noises? And does it run all year round, or is it just in the summertime?
We organise trips out there, and they're usually trying to target key people, if we like, who may help us or who need to have information about the island. So it might be policymakers or whoever it is. There's no wharf or anything like that there. So it's a beach landing, and it's really, really weather dependent. And so it's usually something, well, with the exception of having researchers out there year round, if we're doing advocacy trips, it's usually something in the summer. So, I mean, if you came to New Zealand and you were interested, the best way would be to contact me. There's details on our website, and we can see what can be done. But arranging for boats, there's no ferry service or anything like that to the island. So it takes a little bit of work.
Sure. Maybe in the future, some sort of ecotourism, though, would help drive up just, the public knowing about the islands and what is there or what should be there, and just reinforcing in the general public, therefore, how much they need to be preserved. Because we have similar problems here in Bermuda with a lot of the issues you talk about with preserving certain species of marine life. We have islands, smaller islands in the Great Sound and the Harrington Sound here, which, people would tell you very similar stories, trying to protect basically Kawaus, which are petrels, very similar to yours. And so it's an interesting, that it's so similar. The problems exist down there like they do here. But here they do organize pretty regular tours out to where they've had a very successful reintroduction of the petrel, which was almost extinct 50 years ago. And so now the general public is very aware of that petrel, again, called the Kawau. And, it's sort of a native sort of success story, and people take pride in it. And that just makes it a little bit of an easier cause for people to spend money and time and effort to keep it going, sort of thing. So anyway,
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the information you've given us. And it's always good to see success, people trying to help, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with that ecotourism opportunity. The Gulf should have massive whale populations in it. It once did, and so between the cetaceans, we often see dolphins, and the seabirds, there's so many opportunity. Regeneration, can present amazing economic gains as well. So, the two aren't divorced from one another.
Anyone else in the audience have any further questions they'd like to ask? Sue, just if I may, just seeing as how islands and small islands especially, such as the noises, are such important repositories for native species, is there cause, in your opinion, for a wider and more regional and perhaps more international cause for protecting such islands under international law, potentially?
Gosh, wouldn't it be nice to have some kind of a standard? What we do with the noises at the moment is that, because of the state that they're in, we can use them to guide restoration efforts on other islands in the Hauraki Gulf. So, there's an awful lot of work being done around the Hauraki Gulf terrestrially with replanting programs and so on, and regeneration programs. So, we have a seed bank there that we can use, which has some really unusual and endangered native seeds. And, just for people to understand the importance of being able to have those seabirds there and what they bring. So it's almost a living guide for what you can achieve elsewhere. And the islands are special, but what they show is that other places can be just as special or even more special, because there could be a much bigger landmass. So they'll support much more terrestrial biodiversity. And as far as the marine environment's concerned, we have so many different habitats there that the protection of them is also a way of guiding restoration elsewhere, that it can be studied and without the impacts of the things that we have today.
And if any further? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I've learned so much. I'm just wondering how accessible would people go there to snorkel? I'm just curious. Okay, I'm just thinking, we're told and we know that it's much easier to sway somebody's, opinion, or if they're young or children, than it is people who are well set in their ways and what they're getting out of a situation. So I'm just wondering how possible it would be to have senior students coming out for snorkeling and having a live presentation and then going the next, what you're doing. I don't know, how far you are from the mainland where they could just do that. Is that something that's been considered?
And we do that. So there's a company called Experiencing Marine Reserves. So they work with young people, and we have rangatahi or young people come out there for snorkeling trips. And often we'll give them a bit of a talk on the beach. But access to the islands is really weather dependent. They're quite exposed out there. So we have to pick our times, because obviously we have to be really careful with people's safety. But yeah, even now you'll get boats that'll come out there, and nothing brings our family more joy than to see mum and dad with the little kiddies out snorkeling, and because it's what we remember as kids as well. So we want to encourage that sort of thing, but at the moment, what you can see is a fraction of what you could see. So yeah, that's something that we aspire to in the future, because it's a great way of engaging people, and it's a great way of getting them to care.
Well, we know that in Bermuda, folks like myself have been snorkeling since the 50s. That's a long time ago. The dramatic change that we've seen, I've seen personally, is, we know about it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the audience? If we may, Sue, I'd like to once more ask the audience, myself, to once more return with a round of applause. Thank you very much, Sue, for sharing so much about your information on the work to ensure the conservation project and the noises. And it's our hope that your presentation and questions today will inspire and encourage discussions throughout Bermuda and other island communities around the world.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you very much as well to Chubb Bermuda, the sponsor of our BUEI Talks Island SOS series. And you can check out the entire BUEI Island Talks series on the CITV Bermuda channel and on the BUEI YouTube channel as well. It's our hope that you will join us again on the first Sunday of the next 3 months for our next couple presentations on the Island SOS series. I'm William Campbell, and I look forward to sharing with you more in the future.